Well, what is up, everybody? We are live. Hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday, man. The combine is over. This is what we've, as NFL draft fans here, been super excited to watch. And I feel like, there's always a lot of really entertaining news and there's always a lot of overreaction when it comes to the NFL combine. So we're going to kind of break all that down before we get into the mock draft and talk about, what did we learn and what really matters when it comes to combine testing, if anything. I think for me, I've always looked at the combine as a time to find out a lot of breaking NFL news, right? And just like we had seen the trade for Deebo Samuel as he got traded over to the Washington Commanders, a lot of these types of moves and getting really a good idea of what teams are going to do in free agency is really a lot of the main news that comes from the combine. Because if you think about it, a lot of these players, they come, the college guys, they come and they do testing, and the draft is not for another 2 months. They still got their pro day, they got the private workouts. All of those kinds of things are really the most important part of this process. The combine is really just the start for a lot of them. So, even if guys kind of blow over the combine or they do super well and you feel like they really bump their stock, sometimes a lot of that hype will kind of wear off, and the opposite seems to be true as well. But a couple of things that really stood out to me when it comes to the combine and the testing is obviously this running back group. I think that they are special in a lot of different ways. It bummed me out to kind of not see Ashton Genty. But when you look at a lot of the live results, or maybe some of the top performers, right? When you kind of break a lot of this down here from the running back position, you'll see a lot of these guys that are really fast. I think Bashal Tutin did a really good job of raising his overall draft stock. Rashard Smith to an extent as well when you look at the 40. But it's really, guys like Trevion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, the two Ohio State backs, I think did themselves a lot of favors, and Omarion Hampton as well. I think anytime you're looking at skill position players, whether it be running backs or tight ends or wide receivers, the 40-yard dash is really not that important, in my opinion. I always look at things like a 10-yard split, right? And the reason is because that explosion and your ability to really get to those first 10 yards really quickly gives you a huge advantage as an athlete in general, because you're going to be able to create separation in the early spaces, and then the catch-up speed and then the ability to have somebody kind of gain on you. It just doesn't happen very often within a game. So the 10-yard split is something that I think is always a lot more imperative. And when you look at guys, like, I was really shocked by how good Quinshon Judkins' first 10 yards were. In fact, it was a little bit better by 0.01 seconds over Trevion Henderson. But Omarion Hampton, Trevion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, really, really solid, especially for guys like Judkins and Hampton that are bigger running backs, to be able to have that kind of explosion. Obviously, you don't see as much of that, with somebody all the way down the list here like Caleb Johnson, which I know I've been a little bit lower on somebody like him. I'm not really surprised by that. You look at his film, he's never really somebody that is an explosive type of a runner. He's just more of a smooth athlete in a sense for somebody his size. So sometimes those kind of things, like, oh yeah, I saw that on tape, it kind of pops off. That's kind of how scouts look at it. Or maybe it gives them an opportunity, like, hey, let me go back and look at somebody like Bashal Tutin and see what we missed. But otherwise, it doesn't really have the most dramatic effect. I think by far and away the biggest winner was Nicky Manwari. And when you look at when you break down all of the participants in the draft, Nicky Manwari's 10-yard split was the best of all of them, or at least tied with a few other guys like Tutin and Royals, Darian Portal, and Matthew Golden, who I think was another winner. And what's really nice is, it helps a guy like Manwari out a lot because he's got amazing tape. He's somebody that's very highly touted, but because of his size and him being a really big safety, some people thought, does he have the athleticism to be able to play in the NFL draft? Well, not only does he, the combine proved that he has more than you probably think. Matthew Golden, somebody that I felt like was unbelievably smooth route runner, just a buttery smooth athlete, route runner. He kind of measured in a little bit smaller than I thought, which I thought was going to hinder him. I thought he was going to be over 6 feet. He only ended up being 5'11", but he was a lot more athletic than I thought he was. And so I think he did himself a lot of favors. And I truly believe these top two guys, Manwari and Golden, catapulted themselves clearly into the first round because the tape was good and the athleticism was off the charts, and that really, can help you take your overall assessment of them to an entirely new level, in my opinion. So, David Bedford, let's talk draft. I love it. Let's go ahead and do it, man. And we're going to do a first round mock here. We are going to do obviously no trades this time around, and then we're going to spend a little bit more time at the end talking about my Broncos. And I'm going to go through it a little bit faster because I don't think that there's a lot of differences when you talk about the top of the draft. What I do think is I don't see a scenario in which the quarterbacks don't go 1 and 2, or at least a quarterback doesn't go number 1. It's just such an important position. So whether it's the Titans taking him or not is to be determined. But I think ultimately somebody's going to trade up for that number 1 spot. We're gonna have to go ahead and see. But for the sake of this, and people will start to realize this as the coming days, as the pro days happen, as a lot more of the assessment happens. But guys, I'm sorry to tell you that Shedeur Sanders is a better quarterback than Cam Ward. He's much more ready to be in the NFL draft, to be a pro player. I think Cam Ward could ultimately have a really good career, but Shedeur brings a lot of really unique traits that, yes, he didn't do himself the most amount of favors when he was at Colorado, but man, you see some special traits from him. So I think ultimately he's going to be the number 1. But for the sake of this, I don't think the Titans are going to ultimately go with the quarterback. I think they're going to probably sign Sam Darnold. I'm living back in the heyday. And I think they're going to trade out of this pick, and I think they'll eventually end up with Abdul Carter, who's the best edge rusher in this draft, which is what I think that they're ultimately going to do. So for this sake, I'm going to go ahead and take Abdul Carter if it ever even wants to work. And then we got the number 2 pick. We got the Cleveland Browns. I look at the Cleveland Browns and I'm saying, hey, listen, Travis Hunter would be really interesting and unique for them. But if they're going to trade Myles Garrett, which I think they ultimately would, I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up going with somebody like a Mason Graham, because he's just consistently talked about as one of the most dominant players in the draft overall. So I think Mason Graham is going to fall here. Not fall. He's going to go here at number 2 to Cleveland. The New York Giants, they're obviously in the quarterback sweepstakes. I haven't taken Shedeur Sanders, but like I said, I think they're probably going to end up moving up to take their guy. I really do. And I think the other team that's going to ultimately do it is either the Raiders or the Jets. So we'll address that once we get there. Travis Hunter falls to the Patriots. They get an unbelievable gift of just being able to have the best overall player, in my opinion, in this draft. Somebody that can help them on both sides of the field. And a back-to-back CU pick would be really cool. I think that there's a really high chance that it happens because those are 2 guys that are just really impressive. Shedeur has been killing the interviews. He's going to continue to do so. And Travis Hunter, man, he's the complete package. He's probably one of the best prospects coming out of college in a long, long, long time. All right, so now we get down to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there's a lot of different ways that the Jags can go. They obviously need D-line help. They need cornerback help. Somebody that I think helped themselves a lot in the combine was Jahdae Barron overall. Now, I don't think he's going to go this high, but I think he's somebody that really, really popped off. Could he go this high? Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, given, kind of what he shows on tape and what he's done overall. But I don't know if I'm ready to make that sort of a assessment or be able to say, hey, I can see this going. I think what they're going to ultimately do in Jacksonville, and it's kind of a tough one, is they really switched up these boards on me too. Is kind of be able to look back and say, all right, let's go best player available. Let's see if we're able to. And the fact that Abdul Carter and Mason Graham went off early really does affect them. So you know what? Now that I kind of think about it, they could go Will Johnson or they could go Jahdae Barron. And I think for the sake of just the draft, and I think what helped them catapult a little bit, I think what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put Jahdae Barron here at number 5. But I could see that being Will Johnson. Either way, but I think, they're going to address the secondary. Looking at the Raiders, this is where it's going to get really interesting at 6 and 7, because one of those teams are going to have to make a move up to get one of the quarterbacks that they want, period. So obviously what happens in free agency, we're going to have to kind of wait and see overall. But I think that at the end of the day, the Raiders probably end up going with Cam Ward. And then, that leaves the Jets to be able to just kind of sit back and say, hey, we can either trade out of this pick or go best player available. Maybe somebody like a Malachi Starks or anything like that. So when you're looking at a few of the different options, Tetherall and McMillan would actually be interesting. I don't know if he did himself a lot of favors by not testing at this draft, because I think it made a lot of other guys really jump up and pop off to somebody like them. I can see them going Tyler Warren and really just giving whoever their quarterback's going to be, a weapon moving forward. But what I think is somebody that makes a ton of sense here with the Jets, and is just a player that I think can play everywhere, is Jalen Walker, the linebacker out of Georgia. Unbelievable player. He's one of my favorite prospects. I definitely would say he's a top 10 guy, and his versatility helps them a lot because they could use a little bit of help, along the D line, somebody opposite of what's his name that they got in the draft a few years ago. I'm blanking on his name, but he really showed a lot of pop this past year. And so, having somebody be able to pressure the quarterback alongside him, I think will be really, really big. But he's also somebody that could just fly across the field and really make a lot of plays. A lot of people had Jalen Walker mocked to the Panthers. That's somebody that would make a lot of sense too. But I think the Panthers really are desperate right now, even though they need to be able to bolster their defense, because their defense, specifically the defensive line, is terrible. I think they'd be really tempted to go with somebody like Tet McMillan here, because he's one of the very few highly touted true outside X receivers. And he's someone that I think could make a lot of sense there. And this is a really deep defensive line and pass rushing group, meaning that if they needed to get somebody, at the later half of the first, if they wanted to trade up, or in the second round, they could still get a really good player. But it might almost be too much for them to not be able to pass up on somebody like Tet McMillan, even though I think as the process goes on, he might be a player that kind of tends to fall. He's just someone that makes a ton of sense for them there. And then when you look at some of the, you could look at some of the defensive tackles, I think this is where you should start thinking about, Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant going. And I also think, from the edge perspective, somebody like a James Pierce is one of those guys that people are either really high on him or really low. I think he's phenomenal. I think Mike Green is phenomenal as well. So both those guys can make a whole ton of sense. And so even though I'm really tempted to go with the Tet McMillan route, I just feel like some of these guys are basically players that you can't really pass up on. And I think this might be a little bit early to a lot, but I think Walter Nolan is somebody that they're just going to love, because he's a really good mix of being able to play, all over the defensive line. He can really wreak havoc, and he can make offensive players' lives hell. He's just such a good player, high motor guy. And so he's somebody that I think makes a lot of sense there in Carolina. In my previous mock draft with trades, I did have the Saints as one of the teams that were trading up to actually go and get Shedeur Sanders. And I don't know why. I just feel like that's a very logical. I love the fit there. I think it's something that will ultimately happen. But if everything kind of stays the same and this is how the board falls to them, there's two guys that really make a lot of sense for them. It's either Tet McMillan or Tyler Warren here. And I'm going to go ahead and just take Tet McMillan here just for the sake of kind of getting this whole thing rolling. But I think they're going to add offensive weapons around whoever the quarterback ends up being. Chris Olave, obviously, with the concussion issues, is quite a problem, and you don't really know what they have. And they could use a pure big body receiver to be able to actually use Chris Olave properly should he come back with all the health concerns. So there's that. And then I think that the Bears will take Will Campbell. And the reason, some people say that Will Campbell didn't really have a very good combine in some senses. He tested really well. He showed that he was really strong. He looked good in the field drills, but he had a little bit shorter arms. So he's someone that I think easily could fill their need for them on the interior of their O-line, which is what they need. Ben Johnson being there, he wants to build it out. Will Johnson's a hell of a prospect, and the versatility of being able to play outside or inside is huge. You can start him off inside if you need to, and then if there's ever a need down the road, you just flip him out. But super good player. The short arms could really work, to an advantage for the Bears, because they could just say, hey, we'll start you out at guard and see what you can do as you get going. So they need to build around. They need to help Caleb Williams as much as they possibly could by protecting him. So they're in desperate need for that. And in the Niners are kind of in a similar situation in a sense of they need to be able to bolster their line. A lot of people said Will Campbell is someone that makes a lot of sense. I really like the Kelvin Banks pick to them as well because of, his ability to be able to, work in that zone. But Armand Membu absolutely tore it up in the combine. Wouldn't surprise me if he's ultimately the first tackle gone. Yes, he can play guard, and yes, he can play. He's probably best served as a tackle, but unbelievably athletic. He tore it up. And the guy, for 330 pounds, I think is what he came in at. He looked stupid good. He really, really looked so good there. And I love the fit here because he can come in there. He can play guard in 1 year and, learn from one of the best tackles to ever, walk the planet. And then if he decides to end up retiring, Armand Membu will stick right in. So I like the back-to-back tackles there as it goes. Let's take a break here because I noticed that there's a lot of comments. So let's see. And Andy, what's up, Andy? How you doing, man? I agree with you 100%. In fact, I think Matthew Golden is a better, more pure prospect and someone that I think, kind of projects to be a better overall NFL guy. Here's kind of where I go back. If you're a team that's looking for a very big body, pure, just outside, physical, up and get it type of a receiver, then Ted McMillan's going to be your guy. But overall, Golden, you can use him everywhere. He's buttery smooth. Like, for example, the Broncos, right? We talked about it. The kind of receivers that Sean Payton's proven to like. Ted McMillan would make sense as someone that could, eventually replace Courtland Sutton. But Matthew Golden is just all around damn good. And so I think that there's a really good chance Matthew Golden can go before all of them. And Paul says, let's get a wide receiver for the Broncos. I think it would be cool. I would be shocked if we did it in the draft early. I think if we do it, it's going to be late. We might address it in free agency, but that's the thing. The Courtland Sutton situation is putting a standstill on a lot of what we're going to do with the receiver room. So, we'll see. We'll see. And let's manifesting Genty. Kodiak, shout out to you, my guy. That would be a freaking dream come true. But I appreciate y'all, man, in the comments. This is fun. Please forgive me. I'm kind of under the weather today, fighting some stuff and not all that. So if I seem a little bit kind of out of it, that's the reason. But I wanted to pop on here. Sanders better than Ward. That's insanity. Well, Lone Star Titan, you might think that it is. And obviously to each their own. But everybody's going to be enamored by Cam Ward and the physical traits and the strong arm and the blah, blah, blah. But let's not forget he didn't really do anything up until this last year at Miami. He was surrounded by unbelievable playmakers. He had a ton of time to throw the ball. But he's not as accurate, and his pocket presence is just not as good as Shedeur Sanders. And I think Shedeur is someone that his game translates to the NFL better. Maybe he doesn't have as high of a ceiling, but I think he translates a lot better. But I guess we'll sit back and find out. All right, getting back into the Packers. Something's wrong with me today. We're going to the Dallas Cowboys now. Everybody and their mom kind of has Ashton Genty going here. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. I think you can also make the argument that like Tyler Warren would make sense here. They kind of seem like they want to get another weapon outside of CeeDee Lamb. Could Luther Burden be that guy potentially? But Kodiak, as much as I wanted you to manifest it, and on the real draft day, we'll be praying that this doesn't happen. I do not see a situation in which Ashton Genty realistically falls past 12. I just don't. I was kind of hoping that he would test at the combine and maybe not test very well, because that sometimes makes teams freak out. I don't know why, but that wasn't the case. So we'll have to go ahead and just kind of roll with the punches. The Dolphins, a lot of people have Tyler Booker going to the Dolphins because obviously they need a lot of interior defensive, offensive line help. But just historically speaking, they've never really, went that route. They've never ultimately developed offensive linemen. And, there's two guys that I think are studly safeties. Obviously, Nick Emmanwori, we saw what he did when he flew up a lot of people's draft boards and absolutely took over the combine. But Malachi Starks is somebody that is a phenomenal playmaker out of Georgia. He makes a ton of sense to go there and replace Javon Holland, who it looks like they're going to lose. And he can just play all over the map on the secondary there. So I'm going to have Malachi Starks going over to the Dolphins, but I can see a lot of these tackles ultimately going there. And then, this is one of those situations where a lot of people always have Tyler Warren go into the Colts. Sure, it makes sense. But the Colts could look at it and say, hey, this is a really deep tight end group. Maybe we can address it later. And maybe we can look at getting some of these pass rushers, since really only, one of them have gone? I mean, and not really. None of the pure edge guys have really gone yet. So if the board fell this way to them, yeah, they've got to look at somebody like a James Pierce and a Mike Green. And whoever they end up ultimately taking, I think the Falcons afterwards would just take the other guy. So if it's James Pierce and Mike Green and James Pierce, or whatever combination that you guys like at edge. I'm a really big fan of James Pierce. I love the sheer size, the length that he has. I think he's been a beast. But Mike Green, we obviously know what he can do as well. I think both those guys are probably the top two at that position when you're looking at it. And then moving on to the Cardinals. The Cardinals are one of those teams where, the offensive defensive line are two areas in which they're going to need to be able to address badly. And when you look at the available tackles, any of these top two guys, Simmons or Banks, could potentially make sense. If you're going to break it down and go into the defensive interior, I love Kenneth Grant. I think he's unbelievably good. And I think he could go as early as this. Derek Harmon is probably somebody I like even more because he gives a little bit more pass rushing prowess. But there are some guys here that are really, really good. But ultimately, somebody's going to have to do it. Somebody's going to have to fall in love, even though I'm not a big Shamar Stewart fan, because I don't really care how athletic you are. If your production is not there, it is what it is. But I'll have Shamar Stewart going there because that's kind of somebody that I could just see the Cardinals going with, a little bit more of a project, but someone that's got crazy traits, and they'll figure it out there with Jonathan Gannon in the system there. So, and then looking at the Bengals, man, the T. Higgins situation is going to be really telling. They obviously need a lot of help on the defensive side of the football as well. And, this is where I can see a Kenneth Grant or a Derek Harmon continuously going. There's been a lot of people that have had them taken, somebody on the back end as well. And I feel like at this particular point, even though they could use a lot more help on their D-line, if Will Johnson's available at pick 17, I think it's a really good, value for them. So I really wouldn't surprise if that happens. And guys, obviously, as you can tell, I'm kind of completely unprepped for this because I'm trying to make it different than my original mock draft. Not really feeling all that good, but that's how I like to do it. I like to kind of do it off the cuff and kind of roll with it. So if there's some things that are a little bit crazy right now, man, y'all holla at me and let me know. But so far, I can see a lot of this happening because it just covers the needs. But we, a lot of the times we get so caught up in like needs of players or needs of teams that you don't really realize that sometimes they're just going to take BPA. I think a lot of teams are going to want to get a piece of this defensive line group as well, especially after seeing what the Eagles did to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And shout out to Kodiak. I just saw your video on that in terms of talking about getting some of those D linemen, and you make a really good point. And I think a lot of teams are going to be going after that too. So we'll have to just go ahead and kind of wait and see. This is where I feel like I've always just felt like this is something that makes sense. Tyler Booker going over to the Seahawks. That they just desperately need interior linemen so badly. Tyler Booker, you hear the greatest things about him. They said he was like a loser at the combine, but because he ran slow, but like really, who cares? He's a guard. He's a good leader. And I think this is a really good area for him. And then, this would break my heart, but I just don't think the Broncos are going to take him anyways. But Jihad Campbell going to the Buccaneers makes a ton of sense. Obviously, they're losing, potentially a couple of linebackers on their team. They need to upgrade there. They love their linebackers. And Jihad Campbell absolutely murdered it at the combine. He just looked so good. He tested well, solid size player, but unbelievably buttery smooth when it comes to his field workouts. So I really, really like it there. And I'm not going to lie, guys, like I didn't even, mean for this to happen, for like the Tyler Warren to fall to Denver. But the reason that I have that happening is because I keep thinking about it. All you would hear from executives, from scouts, from, reporters is everyone talking about how deep this tight end group is and how many good tight ends there are, and you can get some guys in the middle rounds. And so sometimes that as a result will allow for like the top guy, like Tyler Warren, to maybe fall a little bit. Him not working out at the combine could, ultimately have no effect on it. But I kind of got a little bit more optimistic with the idea that Tyler Warren, could start to slide just a little bit. And, maybe that's just because he wasn't talked about a lot, right? Because he didn't really work out this weekend. So that could change. But if this happened, I mean, how would y'all feel? I know Broncos country would probably be freaking out because I'd be losing my mind. Andy says, apparently GMs are split on Warren versus Loveland tight end one also. I can get that. I think a lot of those things kind of get leaked too, right? Because I don't know if it's just because I'm sick of like seeing Loveland constantly mocked to the Broncos, but something about it is like I've always been the kind of guy that loves the more complete tight end. And it was cool hearing like Sean Payton talk about the Joker, right? He was saying like it doesn't have to be somebody that's well-rounded, like you can teach him to block later, but you want him to be able to go out and catch the ball. And I think both those guys are capable. But I think Mason Taylor had a really good combine as well. But if this happens here and Tyler Warren's available, I mean, I don't even care what happens the rest of the draft. I'm all for it. So Tyler Warren is my pick going to the Broncos. And I love everything about it. I'll take Luther Burden going over to the Steelers. And I think at this particular point, the Chargers could go Omarion Hampton, but similarly to tight end, there's just so many running backs. They'll probably, start the tight end run at this particular point. And he'll probably go Colson Loveland there, which would be fine. I wouldn't really be tripping. And then here it just gets a little bit tough with the Packers because I feel like you never know what the hell they're going to do ever. It's almost like impossible, I feel like, to be able to judge it. But, Mykel Williams is someone that is just way too good for them to pass up on. Yeah, they're probably going to end up losing, their top corner there. But I think at this particular point with all of the edge rushers, Mykel Williams makes a ton of sense there. And I like Kenneth Grant a lot in this fit. I think defensive line is something that I feel pretty confident the Vikings will probably address. Kenneth Grant or Derek Harmon is something that would make a ton of sense there. I've always loved this fit, and I feel like it could easily happen. But Emeka Egbuka going to the Texans is dope. I really like that one a lot. And in the Rams, between Josh Simmons or Kelvin Banks, whatever their flavor is, they could certainly go ahead and do that. I'll just have them taking Joshua Simmons. And then I got Matthew Golden going here to the Ravens. I can see him going a lot earlier though. I think now after that combine workout and once people go back and see, I think he can really go as early as, maybe even the Cowboys down here at 12. I can see that but then again, how does he work, in tandem of CeeDee Lamb? Are they too similar skill set wise? Are they different enough? Those are kind of things that you have to start asking yourself. But Matthew Golden would be the best receiver on the Ravens day one, or at least one of the best. He's a really, really good player. I've always liked the Gray Zabel to the Lions. I just feel like he's such a good interior player, somebody that just doesn't lose. They could use interior guys, so I'm gonna stick with that. And this pick gets changed completely, obviously, with the picking with the trading for Debo. There's a lot of different ways that they can go. You're probably gonna go Connerly here, or Kelvin Banks to be able to protect your guy. Or they could even look at, you could look at somebody like a Maxwell Hairston, who I think had a really great combine, who really blew up as one of those players that can sneak into the end of the first round. So I'm going to take it just because that's kind of what the purpose of this mock draft is, to say, who do you think, jumped themselves up into the first round? I think Eman Wari did. I think Maxwell Hairston did. No doubt about it. No doubt about it at all. And speaking of Eman Wari, I haven't gotten him drafted anywhere yet, but there's tons of different teams and places that he could have gone. And it wouldn't surprise me if he's taken before Malachi Starks, because like I said, they're different styles of player. So it's like what kind of, like for the Broncos, I like Imanwari over Malachi Starks because he can kind of fill in a little bit of a void that we have an inside linebacker too, and you can kind of move him around a little bit more. Whereas with other teams, they might love the idea of getting somebody that's a little bit more of like a center field type of a safety. So yeah, I mean, I love it. Let's see. We got the Bills up next. I love Derek Harmon. I think he has to be a first round pick. I just really ultimately believe that. I would hate this, but I'm going to have Imanwari going down to the Chiefs. Like I said, just because I think he ultimately could get into the first round, but there's somebody that they lose Justin Reed. They could have a pretty big opening there, and they would utilize him in a lot of really fun ways. Or also, if they lose Nick Bolton, he's got that versatility to be able to kind of fill in both roles. So ironically, it would actually make a ton of sense. And then, I mean, who knows what the Eagles do? They always ultimately get really good players. I think I had Darius Alexander going here last time, and I can see them doing something like that. So I'll take Darius Alexander at number 32. And that'll complete it. And, really the purpose of this was, guys, is like, who do I think really elevated themselves or made themselves first-round locks? I think Matthew Golden is one of those guys, Maxwell Hairston, Nicky Manwari, just based off of their combine performances, really helped themselves get into, the first round. I think Armand Membu could now ultimately be the first tackle really taken, because he's somebody that really blew it up. And Jahdae Barron could have very, very well jumped Will Johnson as being the best corner or the number one corner taken in this draft. So it was fun, man. The combine was dope. I want to know what y'all think too. And David Bedford here says, after watching Taylor, Ferg, and Helm, I'm out on Loveland. It's funny, man. I can understand why. Like, I like Mason Taylor because I feel like he's buttery smooth, but he can come in and he'll make an impact day one in multiple ways within the offense. Anytime you go with someone that projects out to be like Loveland, even though, a lot of people say he's pretty decent at blocking, sometimes it takes those kinds of prospects a little bit more time to kind of get going. But I'd be good with, and I think ultimately you got to ask yourself too, okay, do I like Colson Loveland more? Do I think he's a better prospect than Mason Taylor, for example? Yes, I do. But do you like Mason Taylor in round 2 more than you like Colson Loveland in round 1, given all the other options in round 1? And I think that's what you have to kind of ultimately ask yourself too, right? It's like, would you rather take a Walter Nolan and a Mason Taylor, or a Colston Loveland and, enter whatever player is available in the second round, like on the defensive side? So you can play that scenario along as well when you're talking about for the Broncos. I think a lot of teams do that as well. So, in this particular case, it's and it's the same thing with the running backs, right? Obviously, I think Genty, just consensus, is like in a league of his own. So he's kind of doing his own thing. He's crushing it. But then you got, a lot of split opinions on who's the second guy. But then like ranks number 2 through 7, how do you judge it, right? Are you fine with, would you either take Trevion in the second, or do you like Devin Neal more, in the 5th, talking about the value too? So, you work through a lot of those different scenarios, which I think is always really interesting as well. And yeah, shout out to David Talks Broncos, man. I agree. I mean, Warren, Loveland are a defensive lineman. I'm happy. I know you've talked a lot about some different defensive linemen that you like, and kudos to you. You were one of the first ones that was in on Alfred Collins. I know CU Andy loves Alfred Collins as well. Could he be available in the second round? I mean, he did himself a lot of favors at the combine this week, so maybe not. If you wanted him, maybe you got to jump up to him. But yeah, I mean, think about that combo, right? Like you get Loveland and you move up. Because I like the idea. I've done a lot of different scenarios. I love the idea of like maybe trading back a few spots in the first round and then trading up into the second round to target a certain player that you're looking for as well, and kind of balancing that out and really picking 2 guys in that 25 to 40 range, 25 to 45 range. Because I think that's where the meat and potatoes of this draft is. So you find a way to do that. We did that a few years back, right? When we moved up to get Javonte Williams. we moved up into the second round to be able to get it. Sean Payton and George Payton specifically has shown he likes to move up in the second and the third rounds whenever he gets the opportunity to do so. Like he moved up in the upper part of the second round to get Mims as well. So you never know. Moving back a little bit in the first round will give you some ammunition to be able to move up again from the to go up a couple spots in round 2. So I dig it. And Andy, you made a good point. I really wanted to. Honestly, I was kind of thinking like, man, I should just have Matthew Golden go here to Carolina, because I can see Carolina addressing defense later, or spending a lot of money in free agency to get some defensive linemen. But I was like, I don't want the post-combine hype to seem like it was too much. But Matthew Golden makes a lot of sense in Carolina. I just think he's so good. I was actually like surprised how good he was when I did the film review and film breakdown on him, because he was just buttery smooth. His combine shocked me even more, because I didn't think he was that fast, because he looked smooth but not necessarily fast. But he's just a smooth athlete. Go back and watch his 40. He looks like he's barely even running. You look at him on the field drills. He looked awesome. So Matthew Golden, I think, is going to be a problem, man. He's really got some. He's very well rounded, very, very well polished. So I think you're absolutely right. And DG, I'm good with getting Hampton in the first. Yeah, I would actually disagree there. I wouldn't. I think that the only running back that's worth taking in the first round is Ashton Genty. Otherwise, and that's because he's generationally a generational type of special talent at running back. Otherwise, I usually wouldn't ever be an advocate of taking a running back in the first round for a lot of different reasons. But after Ashton Genty, especially in this draft, because the fall off from Hampton to Caleb Johnson or Quinshon Judkins or whatever your board is not very big. And so yeah, I wouldn't. Would I hate it? I mean, it would be one of my least favorite choices, probably, for sure. If we ended up doing that, especially just because of how good this defensive line class is, this tight end class is, especially like at the upper half of those positional groupings. I feel like you definitely want to be able to get yourselves one of those guys, one of those playmakers, for sure. So, but I appreciate y'all, man. I'm getting a little tired here, man. I've just been fighting some nasty stuff today, and but I appreciate y'all riding with me. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your Sunday, man. Take care. Let me know below in the comments too. Thanks for everybody in the comments here, but let me know below in the comments too of like who do you feel like was maybe somebody that not only became a first round lock, but really elevated themselves as maybe the top person in their positional grouping. I think Matthew Golden is someone you can make an argument for. Jahdae Barron is someone that you can make another argument for. Did Eman Wari now become the best safety prospect over Malachi Starks? A lot of these interesting conversations we'll have to go back and see. So let me know below. Otherwise, I appreciate y'all, man. Take care of yourselves, and see y'all next time. Peace.